and then there was a fairly brutal takeover of Kirkuk and other disputed territories, and now, 6 months later, thankfully, the airports are open, and there are glimpses of new and better relations between the Kurdistan region and Baghdad. And as I say, these things don't happen quickly, they take their time. So today is an opportunity for our guests, who are well-known academics in their own rights. I know that Mohammed has just co-authored a huge book on Kurdistan, which I've read a little of. It's absolutely huge, and Bill is, I'm sure, published many a paper. So basically, these two eggheads here know an awful lot about the place, and they're going to give you a good view of their views of what happened in the referendum and in the last 6 months, and where we're going to go from here. And that's all I want to say. And I don't know which of you wants to go to.
Thank you, sir. Because you mentioned it,
I told you it's a thick book.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for attending, of course, this evening, and of course my very special thanks to the Honourable Mary Clinton, the MP for Tyneside, for sponsoring the talk, and also, of course, to the Centre for Kurdish Progress, Ibrahim Doguz and Buket Bora for arranging this event. And of course, my special thanks to Mr. Gary Kent for agreeing to chair this panel. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it is fair to say, from a Kurdish perspective, that the perception of the Kurdish people with regards to their own liberation movement and with regards to their friends in the West has changed dramatically as a consequence of the events, or rather the referendum for independence on the 25th of September 2017, and also with regards to the aftermath of what happened after the 16th of October. We all know very well that there seems to be a form of recognition of the Kurdish liberation movement worldwide. This was a luxury that was not afforded the Kurdish people not so long ago. There has indeed been a transformation in the way the Kurdish liberation movement is perceived by both the public, in the West especially, we could say, and policy makers alike. We could make the argument that there has indeed been a transition or recognition from a Kurdish problem transformed into a Kurdish cause and finally into a Kurdish issue. But ladies and gentlemen, is this only recognition, or is it more? This is something that is worth debating based on what happened during the independence referendum and what happened after, or on the 16th of October, and what happened later on. It was quite clear to us Kurds that following World War II, the subject of the Kurds wasn't really acknowledged that much or mentioned that much, even in academic literature. Even the focus of journalists when it came to the Kurdish issue was more about talking about an isolated people, a landlocked people that were struggling for a cause. It really wasn't more than that. And when it came to Western governments and Western authorities, I mean, there was nothing more than sympathy for the Kurdish cause, and the Kurdish cause was seen as an inconvenience, and there was more of an intention, or rather an understanding that it was more of a domestic issue needing domestic solutions. It seems to me, after what happened on the 25th of September and later on After the 16th of October, there has not been that much of a transformation. We can see elements of continuity more than elements of change. We can see elements of consistency more as opposed to departures, which I think has been very heartbreaking for Kurdish people in general, because the Kurdish people in general thought or believed that their struggle had taken huge steps forward. I mean, many people would make the argument that the independence referendum was done without approval from the West for various regional and international powers. But then again, you could make the argument that the uprising of 1991, when the Kurds rose against Saddam Hussein and the Ba'ath Party, was not internationally sanctioned. The elections of May 1992 were not internationally sanctioned. And I remember meeting Ambassador David Mack in Washington, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, and he said, I told the Kurdish leadership very clearly that we are absolutely against these elections you are holding in 1992. So, but still, I mean, the Kurdish leadership went ahead with these things. Another example would be the federalism of 2003 post-Saddam Hussein. The Americans were initially against ethnic federalism. They were more for a geographic federalism, but it was with the determination of the Kurdish leadership that they were able to achieve this. If we look at, for example, relations with Turkey pre-2008 were quite tense. From 2008 onwards, there were gradual and visible improvements. So if we were to talk about the independence referendum and say it wasn't internationally sanctioned, there are other examples, very clear examples, that demonstrate that there have been other achievements in recent Kurdish history where the Kurds haven't been supported directly to achieve those things. And I'll try to go through the positions of various countries as much as I can, because I don't have enough time to go into great detail, but I'll try to go through Turkey's position, Iran's position, the European Union's position, and America's position. For Turkey, Turkey's relations with the Kurdistan region of Iraq was based on security that was shaping a political and economic partnership. The security part was the main foundation, the main pillar of the relationship, and the political and economic developments came on the back of that. The Kurdistan region of Iraq was seen as part of the Turkey security complex, and if we were to look at it from a broader perspective, the Kurdistan region of Iraq was seen as part of the greater regional security complex. So the Kurdish factor in southern Kurdistan, in Iraqi Kurdistan, had become a very important part of Turkish security. And it was based on these things, I would argue, or many people would argue, that the Kurdish leadership miscalculated the position of Turkey. I mean, and there are various miscalculations that I'd like to put forward. I mean, the Kurdish leadership, and I would argue in particular the KDP, probably had an inaccurate assessment of the internal dynamics of the PUK, where the PUK was hugely fragmented, and there was, of course, Iranian influence to a large extent. And also there was the worry by various political groups in southern Kurdistan, not only the PUK alone, that Masoud Barzani would take the credit for the independence referendum. There was also the miscalculation with regards to Erdogan's strong reaction to the referendum. No one, and based on the contacts I've had with various people, it seems that they miscalculated this. And the Turkish government, and Erdogan in particular, at the very top, were very angry with the fact that the Kurds had unilaterally reached this decision to hold a referendum, because maybe in their eyes the Kurdistan region was more of a protectorate, a dependency, and they were quite angry that there was no consultation. And also, it seems to me, based, as I said, on various contacts and research that I've done, that the lower institutions of government in Turkey were more tolerant to the idea of the referendum, but it was at the very top, and President Erdogan that was quite against it. And I believe there are various reasons for this. Turkey had just recently held a constitutional referendum on the 16th of April 2017. Erdogan needed that political rhetoric to mobilise the people and to portray the sense of Turkish nationalism. And also it had not been so long after the failed coup against Erdogan in July 2016. And of course, following that, you have the parliamentary elections, which are due on the 24th of June 2018. These are various factors that I believe contributed to the Turkish reaction, and also where the Kurdish leadership possibly miscalculated. When it comes to Iran, I think the Kurdish leadership probably assumed that Turkey would be on board, because both entities had a Western outlook, both of them are emerging democracies. But again, that didn't work out as assumed. When it comes to Iran, I think there are three factors that determines Iran's perception of the Kurdistan region. One is the geostrategic interest, and then economic interest and security interest. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it is quite clear that the geostrategic interests took precedence over economic and security interests. I mean, trade exchange between Iran and the Kurdistan region reached $4 billion in 2013. For Turkey, it reached double that amount at $8 billion. But for Iran, this was a secondary issue. Security interests again came as a secondary issue, because for Iran, the geostrategic factors were much more important. For example, Iran was worried that with the dismantling, with the Kurdish independence, Iraq would be dismantled into a Sunni state and a Shiite state. The Sunni state would be up for grabs by other regional powers, and even the Shiite state, a smaller mini Shiite state, would be difficult to control, because you would have ideas or elements of Iraqi nationalism still within the country. So this was one of the worries. And also, the Kurdistan region of Iraq, mostly as a consequence of the fight against ISIS, also as a consequence of the sectarian civil war in Iraq between the Sunnis and Shiites, and also as a consequence of the Arab Spring, there seemed to be an overlapping of interest between the Kurdistan region of Iraq, Sunni Arab, Gulf Arab states in the region, and even Sunni states and the West when it came to issues of security and national interest. So you had two sides of this paradigm. On the one hand, you had Iran and the Shiite world on one side, and on the other side, you had these various Sunni entities, including the West. For the West, actually, it was more about terrorism and not associated with alignment along Sunni lines. Another Iranian fear was that an independent Kurdistan would become a very close ally of Turkey, Saudi Arabia, the United States, and even potentially Israel. And this would produce or allow for a very different political orientation to be taking the helms of power in an independent Kurdistan, and it was perceived by the Iranian authorities that the KDP was more pro-Turkish in that respect.